Over the years, I guess, of being around state government, and in my life, going back even to my childhood and the discussions with my dad, and serving in a constitutional office, you see that the real agenda for Georgia is set in the governor's office, or, in my opinion, should be set in the governor's office.
People in the Justice Department figured out that you could do God's work by having a strategy to make African American votes count in redistricting. And the practical effect of that would be that you wind up with white districts and you're certain to get white candidates. So we stopped having the kind of compromise that had always characterized our politics in the South, because before this period of time, if you were in the legislature or the Congress, you served a district that had a lot of African Americans, a lot of conservative, probably farm people up until the real growth in urbanization. So you had to be like Phil Landrum and John Davis and the people that we had in Congress, a moderate, a compromising sort of candidate. But the Republican Party, to their great credit, figured out if you have white districts and black districts, then you can be very ideological.
I told you I moved my family up there in December of 1970, but they didn't like it. My wife didn't like it, and the children weren't happy, and so we decided that we'd move back to the district. When I was there, it was like I was coming home almost every weekend to campaign or to do events or whatever the reason might be. And so we moved back to Albany in '72. And that way I did see more of them actually than I did while I was in D.C., but still I didn't see nearly enough of them. That's what politics does to you, particularly when you have a young family, as I did.
Well, that was the end of his political career, but not the end of his life.
Oh, no.
So what happened then?
Well, you know, I've always said the Lord works in funny ways, and I'm kind of Presbyterian when it comes down to that. It's the best thing that ever happened to us. I don't think Ernie could have gone to Washington and lived through the Nixon thing, because he never could believe that a president of the United States would do something like that. He really didn't.
We studied the train, but it still had this bias in it. For example, they would make the full right-of-way costs, construction costs, and everything try to be supported out of the fare. But if you look at the highways, you don't pay a toll road to get from here to Macon, and it's subsidized all the way. And not only subsidized, it's free. And and if you measured the cost of adding another lane each way, and you played that off against the cost of that train, they're not that far apart. But there's still this bias against the train, and that's what the leadership's got to just come to terms with, to say, both in the national establishment and otherwise. And if you don't have the crisis like we have now, the gas crisis, people are just not going to change. That's just human nature. But we shouldn't miss a crisis.
When I went there, the first year, not one of them spoke to me. When I left, there wasn't one who did not speak to me. All of them was there. On one occasion, when I put a bill in to be voted on, and when it came up for vote, the bill did not pass. And on the rules of the Senate, you can bring it up the next day and ask that it do pass. And when my bill did not pass, I went to the telephone, and we had this phone where you can call all over the state. And I called black people in Athens, Augusta, Savannah, and others to tell them to call their senator and ask them to vote for my bill. And the next day when the bill came up, I moved for reconsideration. That's what you ask for, reconsideration. And when I asked for reconsideration, they called my bill up, and my bill passed under reconsideration. And then the senator from Enigma,
Bobby
Rowan, came up to me and said, Senator Johnson, you got the best organization in Georgia. Because some of his constituents had called him and told him to vote for my bill. But we had the Georgia Voters League, which had memberships in many of the counties, not all 159, but in the larger counties and others. And I had called them and asked them to call their senator. But Bobby Rowan said to me, you got the strongest and the most effective organization in Georgia. And Bobby Rowan became my friend. And Bobby Rowan was from South Georgia, Enigma, Georgia. And, but he became my friend. But the answer to your question is that the ice began to crack at that meeting. And after that, the acceptance became, came along very well.
But Leroy Johnson would come in, very polite, sit at his desk. When you walked over to shake his hand, he was always there early. But he was always reading his bills, not trying to create a ruckus or anything. But you walk over, he'd stand up, he always addressed you as Senator. Senator Rowan, how are you doing? Say, fine. And then he would come to you during the day. You know, back then they'd have, you know, debate and decorum, and you would, people would walk around in the chamber, and he'd come over and say, Senator, I read your bill, and I like it. I just want you to know I'm going to be supporting it. Now, he never come over and told you didn't like it. He only came and said, well, after he does that all year long, and then once in a while he had something he wanted, he'd come back over and say, you know what, Senator Rowan, you've been a good senator. And whenever this session is over, I'm going to go down to Enigma and Nashville and Race City. I have some friends in the black churches, and I'm going to tell them I hope they reelect you, because you're a good senator. And you know, that was good news, because back then it was real hard to get good connections without getting caught doing it. You know, it was a sort of a tense time politically. But I remember that, and then Leroy said, oh, and incidentally, I've got this little bill. You didn't even have to read it. I said, Leroy, I'm for it. Don't worry about it. I'm for it. He was very effective. And Hugh Gillis, who was a great senator as well, and he was almost from the exact opposite spectrum of the world as Leroy Johnson. Two of them began to realize the power of each other. And there was many times when I was there when Hugh Gillis and Leroy Johnson got on the same side of an issue. It was called a mortal lock on the Senate. Nobody could beat them. The governor, the lieutenant governor, nobody.